Hello, everybody. So it is Dr. Cooper with Foundations Pediatric Clinic, and I'm coming to you guys with the second half of trauma. Is it a serious concern? Now, last time we were on, we had a special guest, and our special guest will again be with us today. But before we get into this video, I wanted to encourage you guys to go ahead and not only like this video, but to share it. A lot of people that we know, a lot of our friends and family, unfortunately, have experienced trauma at some form or some time in their life. So it's important that they have an opportunity to view this information, as it will provide information on things that they can do and then also ways that they can move forward. So, without further ado, I wanted to go ahead and bring on our special guest, Mrs. Sabrina Cooper. She is a mental health specialist, and she focuses a lot on different issues in mental health, but with a focus in trauma. So that is one of the main reasons why we have her on today. So, as mentioned, I will be bringing her on. And so here she is. Welcome, welcome. It is so good to have you back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Very good.
Mhm.
Okay. So I wanted to provide you with an opportunity to share with our viewers a little bit about what you do and what your focus is, as far as trauma, and why it's important to you, as this may be their first time getting to meet you.
Mhm. Thank you. Yes, so primarily I have a very diverse clientele. I meet with women, men, kiddos of all kinds coming from all different backgrounds. Currently, I have a pretty large clientele that's DCF involved. And with that comes there's some challenges in the home. With a lot of the kiddos, there's placements in different homes and things of that nature. And I don't know if this is something that people are aware of, here it is. A kiddo being changed over from different house and different home and being in foster care and things of that nature can be very challenging and can leave a negative impact, especially in the event of some kiddos that I have. They are in families of 4 or 5, and they're seeing their siblings being adopted, and they are being moved around from home to home simply because they exhibit different behaviors. And the sad part is that all of those kiddos grew up in the same house initially, and kind of like what we touched on last time, something could have left a long lasting trauma impact for them, but it didn't for their siblings, or it could be a number of other different makeups that lead to them receiving that situation differently and then therefore responding differently, showing different behaviors. And now, because of a beginning or an extinguishing of fact, now they're left like this and representing in this way, that's now causing more trauma because now they're being passed around, if you will, from foster home to foster home.
Wow, wow.
Mhm.
So that's a very unfortunate thing that you're
Mhm.
describing. So with that, I'm hearing that one particular child, like you said, is further traumatized because the
Yeah.
way they're expressing their grief, the way they're
Mhm.
expressing their sadness, their anger, is further causing harm to
Yeah.
that particular child. So I think it's important for us to, as community members, to be aware of this so that we are able to do what we can, with helping children and families who might be foster families, or might even be families that are unfortunately starting to near to that point to where someone needs to step in. We
Mhm.
talked a little bit about about how trauma from a parent can be passed on to a child, and
Mhm.
so on and so forth. So, by us as community members being aware of this, we can perhaps start to recognize these signs and these things that are going on with the parent and potentially step in and prevent this separation that's going on. Because like in the instance that you described with the or with the child that's moved to a foster family,
Mhm.
I'm also thinking of a particular instance to where not only is the child who is having a hard time with the traumatic event dealing with trauma by the separation, but also the sibling that's left behind. Now,
Mhm.
perhaps they have an event or they have a response, if you will, to
Mhm.
this separation that before might not have been there if they could have been kept together. So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that to our attention, because in the foster care system, there's a
Mhm.
lot of different things that are occurring, but we need to be aware so that we can support and we can help. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for sharing a bit about what you do on your day to day, because yes, dealing with DFSS, or sorry, DFCS. Can you say it again? Because I feel like I've messed it up.
It's DCF here. I feel like depending on where you are, it has different acronyms.
Okay, okay.
Mhm.
And so basically, yes, that's anything in the foster care system. So it can be in some places it's CYFD, DCF.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a
Mhm.
lot of different
Mhm.
acronyms, but it's basically the systems that deal with children who need to be removed from home. And you are
Yeah.
correct. It does
Mhm.
vary, because I'm thinking about how it was called in Albuquerque and
Mhm.
also in San Bernardino. So we're going to go ahead and get into our talk for today, which is trauma. Is it
Mhm.
a serious concern? Is it something that we should be concerned about, and why? And at our last talk, we stopped off on speaking about adverse childhood events.
Mhm.
Is it the same as trauma, or is it something in its own neighborhood that perhaps it's similar but not the same? But when we left off, we said that trauma was part of the adverse childhood event, where the adverse childhood event is the umbrella that covers the trauma. So there's a lot of different things that might be considered an adverse childhood event that can't be put under trauma. So with that, I wanted to go ahead and get some of our expertise from Mrs. Cooper. So whenever we last left off, we were talking about um, diving into how trauma can be something that is experienced differently for individuals. So with that, now that we know that it is something that's different for individual and it's different for adults and children, I
Mhm.
also wanted you to explain or talk to us a little bit about why we should be concerned about it. Why is it a concern?
Mhm. It's a good question. Um, I think the biggest part of it is that trauma can come back at any moment. You're going through a maybe even for people that perhaps even decided to address their trauma, to acknowledge it, and to try and manage it or to work through it. It can still represent itself in various different ways. And so this is just like it's almost the same impact for someone that hasn't acknowledged it and for someone that has. It can come up at any time. It can be halting, it can be arresting. You could be going about your day and then all of a sudden you're just standing on the side of the street and you're unsure. In my practice, I've talked to a few different people, various ages, from teenage to a grown adult, and the sentiment is somewhat the same. People have literally been walking around, going about their day, and then all of a sudden they find themselves somewhere, they're unsure how they got there. Or they're going about their day-to-day practice, interacting with people, engaging, and then they have a triggering event. And basically it's something that calls you to stop in your tracks, move yourself from day-to-day activities, to isolate yourself and to withdraw, and you have no idea what's going on. Now, yes, not everyone is going to experience it to the same degree. I believe a lot of people are able to just kind of stuff it down and continue. But I believe that leads back to, or for me, that brings up the same ideology of ACEs, where it's just like, this is something that has occurred. I'm just making do. I'm getting through with it. It's not a big deal. But then we see how it has an impact on people's mental health and it has an impact on people's physical health. And so, even though in the forefront of your mind, you feel like you're fine and you're going through everything just well, and you see other people, you know, like they have the same problem and they're fine, there's an underlying issue there that's actually pulling you off course that, if addressed, could actually, you know, lead to a very different path.
Yeah. So I noticed that you mentioned the physical and mental. So that's something that I also wanted to touch on as well too. As we're dealing with different mental stressors, different mental illness, that unfortunately can start to alter our immune system. It can
Mhm.
make us more prone to sickness. It can make us more prone to bad outcomes when it comes to things like diabetes, all the way up to cancer outcomes. So what you have as far as your mental, I'm going to call it your mental piggy bank, the good experiences, the love, the nurturing, all that that's come throughout your lifetime can be altered and somewhat, and maybe even if it's big enough, completely undone. So this piggy bank that you have that helps to regulate some of the different hormones. I'm thinking of cortisol, or that deals with our
Mhm.
stress response. If cortisol is out of whack and if stress continues to remain that comes from traumas, our immune system doesn't function like it should. So, yes,
Right.
definitely the two are entwined and the two are important. And additionally, I wanted to bring to our attention about what we can do. So I would like to now to switch on the topic and talk about perhaps what are some of the things that we can do, because as we mentioned, we know that it's pervasive in the community. We know that it
Mhm.
affects a lot of different people. It affects young and old people. So, what are some of the different things that we can do for our community members?
Awareness. Awareness is very important. And then not being afraid to seek help. You know, even if it's the smallest thing. And I think I mentioned this last time. Um, it's very common for people, specifically people of color, to diminish trauma in their life because it'll be acknowledged as, oh, everybody goes through this, or my situation isn't that bad. And it's easily minimized and dismissed. And it would hugely benefit the population if people just said, what if, you know, it's not going to hurt me to go talk to somebody, to sort through things. And perhaps people aren't specifically comfortable with coming to perhaps a professional. And that's where you have social groups, you know, just seek some kind of community, seek a safe space, somewhere where you can feel heard, you can voice different concerns, and just like find those people that have those common interests or life situations as yourself, mostly because when you go through something with somebody, it can really highlight some areas in your own life and perhaps like help to point you in the right direction as well. So I just say awareness, and don't minimize, and don't be afraid to seek help.
Yes. So those are very good things. Additionally, I'd like to add for some of our viewers who might be health professionals who are wondering, well, okay, all right, I'm not even in the mental health profession. Maybe perhaps you're another pediatrician and you're thinking, well, I haven't dealt with many patients who have these issues that are coming that they're bringing. But there are
Mhm.
different things that we as health professionals can do, whether or not we think that we're in a arena to where we're going to deal with this that much. We
Mhm.
can say, well, I don't see that many foster children through my practice, or I'm a surgeon, what have you. It's something
Mhm.
that you feel like you're not really coming in contact with that often. But I want to bring to attention, as Mrs. Cooper said, Mrs. Sabrina was talking about, to where she said, things that deal with a lot of that deal with culture, things that unfortunately may deal with race. So those are things that, without knowing it, you may be potentially, or even subconsciously, or not subconsciously, but you might be inadvertently causing additional trauma by
Mhm.
perhaps doing things that are making the patient to feel small. We've been taught in medical school, whenever you're speaking to a patient, you want to make sure that you get down on their level, you sit down, you minimize that power difference by
Mhm.
speaking at an eye level. You take time to hear what they're saying, and you don't talk over that individual. So these are things that we can do as healthcare providers, as educators, as community leaders, to make sure that those of us who are in authority are not
Mhm.
further exacerbating the problem. Additionally, I wanted to speak to any sort of family member or friend, as Mrs. Sabrina was saying, that it helps to raise awareness. So, as you are aware, you can also be an advocate for an individual. And I wanted to tell just a quick story about a friend of mine who was in a car accident, and the car accident was so traumatic to her that every
Mhm.
time she would encounter a stressful event or go anywhere near a hospital, she would just become mute. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, she could not articulate. This was a very smart individual who was at the top of her class. And now she just, in stressful situations, anytime she had to deal with any sort of hospital setting, she shut down. So thankfully, I had had an opportunity to speak to her during one of the calm events. And I heard that she felt stressed and she would just shut down. So I was able to accompany her to a hospital ER visit during one of those episodes, because she called me, or excuse me, she texted me. That's what happened. She texted me, and I was able to go to the ER and sit with her, and she was able to
Mhm.
type out her responses. And I was able to communicate some of the things that I knew that she was trying to say, and be an advocate for her. So
Mhm.
this may be a situation that may seem um, that is like, well, okay, well, my friend, was in a car accident and it didn't happen to her, but I want you to
Mhm.
look for the subtle cues. Maybe your friend is starting to be more quiet, or they're stuttering, or they're starting to wring their hands. So look for those small signs, because it
Mhm.
may not be something that extreme as I'm
Mhm.
describing, but we want to make sure that we're not allowing these instances that are traumatic to build and to be brushed under the rug, and unfortunately turn into fuel for the fire for
Yeah.
future instances. So thank you so much. I think we're almost out of time. But at the last talk, you had mentioned some different places. But before we left off this time, I wanted to see if you had any additional places that we might be able to find information, whether for ourselves as healthcare providers or other community members.
Just finding information on trauma. I would just say there's, like, specific things that are related to trauma, and Amazon has a really good selection for just to get knowledge on different books and things like that. Um, there's different things that are out there, and looking into it, like, again, I don't wanna say just Google it because it's, like, the worst thing you can get into, But if you know a specific topic or something that you're searching or looking for, looking into Amazon, I personally, right now, I'm reading a book. It's called Trauma Recovery, and just learning more about what goes on and what it looks like perhaps when someone is in recovery. Like Dr. Cooper mentioned, people have different symptoms that show when they're experiencing something. And so, getting more knowledge about the information, perhaps we'll be able to see what's going on in ourselves and in our loved ones.
Okay, I like that. I like that you're reading about it, and that's what we need to do. We need to find different sources that talk about the different things that are affecting our
Mhm.
community. So, us as healthcare providers, us as educators, and then us as community members, it's important
Mhm.
that we seek out the different resources, as there's a lot of different resources are available. Thankfully, us as a healthcare community, we're trying to become more sensitive, more culturally compliant, more informed when we're dealing with a lot of the different social injustices that are occurring.
Mhm.
There's even courses on how to be more trauma informed when you're providing care. So, like Mrs. Sabrina said, is maybe not the best way to find information by just Googling it, but it would be a good start. So if you have nowhere else
Mhm.
to turn, Google it, and then seek out some of the healthcare authorities in your neighborhood, or those that maybe you might be seeing, or you might even have a relationship. You can ask them, and that would at least start the conversation and help you
Mhm.
to find out, well, is this a good way to handle it? Is this a good recommendation? So again, it's okay to start with Google, but you want to make sure that you are backing that information up with a healthcare provider. So thank
Yeah.
you so much, Mrs. Sabrina. Any last words before we call it a night?
Um, just keep the awareness going. I love this. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Okay, very
Mhm.
good. All right, well, that is it for now. Just as a reminder, Foundation's Pediatric Clinic provides both inpatient and outpatient care for children from 0 to 21, and we also offer different behavioral health assessments as well too. So if you have any questions, you can find more information on our website at www.foundationspc.com, and you can give us a call to schedule an appointment at 480 847 0900. Good night for now.